It all started when I was living in Boston as a student attending UMass. I go to log into my university email account one morning, hoping that my request for a term paper extension had been approved of. There's nothing about the extension, but there is a little notification from Gmail saying that I had been logged in at a different location. This was kind of confusing since I only log into my Gmail account via my phone, my laptop, or the computer labs on campus. It was a Monday morning, too. I hadn't been to campus all weekend, so just how I was logged in at a different location was beyond me. I put it down to a glitch or something and just carried on with my day. Only these notifications didn't stop. I kept getting little banners on my phone popping up, informing me that a login attempt had been made from an IP I didn't recognize at all. It only stopped when I changed my password to one of those overly complicated series of letters and numbers. That's when things got really weird. For 9 months out of the year, Boston is pretty much a rainy, miserable, sodded mess. So to aid in my mental health maintenance, I used to keep the blinds in my apartment closed pretty much all the time. Who wants to gaze out of their window at ceaseless drizzle? So you can imagine how strange it was that I'd come home day after day to find the blinds open. At first, I furiously contacted the landlord and demanded to know why they were entering my apartment without permission. They flat out denied this, of course, and told me they always gave me 48 hours written warning when they needed to enter the property. I was getting pretty scared at this point, so I flat out asked the landlord who could be entering my apartment when I wasn't there. He paused, for way too long, told me to call the cops immediately, then hung up. After the landlord phone call, all the weird stuff just dropped off for a while. I was convinced that I'd caught the landlord sneaking around my apartment. The fact his solution was to just call the cops told me everything I needed to know. Besides, you confront someone, the thing stops. That's as good an indication of guilt as anything, right? Wrong. So wrong. I get a text one morning from an unknown number. Look outside was all it said. I figured it's one of my friends with a new number or something, nothing to freak out over, so I just head downstairs to the front doors of the apartment building to see who's there. There's no one. Instead, there's a box of chocolates and a dozen roses soaking up the rain. That's when I realized just what had been happening the past month or so. I was being stalked day and night by some creepy social moron who had selfishly made me feel like I was the one going nuts. I was furious, way angrier than I'd mistakenly been with my landlord, who I ended up apologizing profusely to when the time came. I took their advice too. I did finally call the cops who, despite my skepticism, took my complaints very seriously. Turns out the Boston Strangler still haunts the cops around Boston. Violence against women is something they abhor almost out of genetic memory. Now, long story short, the guy who was stalking me was the head of the IT department at UMass, and therefore had access to all kinds of digitized files on the attending students. This included email addresses, phone numbers, term time addresses, and a plethora of other information. No wonder they'd been able to run rings around me, and they knew me almost as well as I knew myself. He was arrested, charged, and I got a restraining order against him. He was also subsequently fired from UMass and was barred from holding a job with any kind of educational institution for the rest of his life. This happened back when I used to get on Grindr, but it always reminds me of how glad I am that I'm no longer doing the online dating thing. For those unfamiliar with Grindr, it's a gay dating app that shows guys nearby. It makes you use your location while using the app, but it doesn't give your exact location unless you send it to the person directly. I got a message from a blank profile. No name, no pic, and no bio. The only thing that popped up was how close he was, less than a mile away. This happens a lot because there are a lot of closeted guys out there, especially back then. Being an overweight guy in the gay community, I had to take anything I could, because most gay guys in my community wouldn't even give me the time of day. He started off nice enough. introduced himself as Jesus and asked how I was doing and all of that sort of small talk. He told me he was into chubbier guys, and after exchanging pics, we both agreed that we found the other one attractive. He asked me if I'd like to come over to play video games and maybe have some fun. I'd only met a couple of guys off of Grindr, and although we had some good times, it ultimately didn't pan out. However, I had met them somewhere public first, so I'd never met anyone at their place or had anyone come over to mine. I figured it had been long enough and some casual fun might be nice. Plus, he was really cute and actually my type. He agrees to come pick me up since I'm only a few blocks away. Apparently, he lived in the nearby trailer park. I decide I'd like to shower first, and he says he'll head over. Then, he says he's really embarrassed to ask, but wonders if I'd be willing to lend him $20. Supposedly he lived with his mom, and she had left for the weekend without any food money for him. I know it was really stupid in hindsight, but I felt kinda bad for him. I tell him I don't have any cash, but he says that's okay, I can just send him some money through an app. I don't remember what it's called, but it was something like Venmo. I go ahead and send it, take my shower, and then let him know I'm ready. He says he's heading out, but can't find his keys. I say it's okay, I'll just wait outside for him. I hadn't given him my address yet, but I was almost ready to. However, when I asked if he had found them, he had never responded. Minutes went by, then an hour. I messaged him again to ask if he was still coming, and I could see him going on and offline, so I know he read my messages. I finally just accepted he was ghosting me and probably just wanted money. I messaged him one last time and told him that it was pretty messed up, as well as explained that had he just asked, I would have given him the money without having to go through all of that. What can I say? I can be a softie sometimes. Fast forward a couple of weeks. I never heard back from him, so I just blocked him. I get another message from someone on Grindr relatively close to me. His profile is also blank, which raises my suspicions. He tells me he's also into chubby guys, which really makes me suspicious because it's highly unlikely two chubby chasers live so close to me. We trade pics again, and it's a different guy. However, he suddenly asks for money again. In Grindr, you can create as many accounts as you'd like. All you need is an email address. There were tons of spam accounts on there that were automated. It was a real pain. Anyways, I call him out because I was like 95% sure it was Jesus. At first, he acts like he doesn't know what I'm talking about, calls me crazy, and then blocks me. I felt a little bad because I thought maybe I had made a mistake and just chased off a guy for nothing. Then again, his sudden offensive reaction made me have doubts. Weeks go by, and every so often this same guy tries to fool me even though I don't fall for it. Eventually, I blow up on him and ask him what his problem is. We start going at it, and eventually he says, "You won't say that to my face." I tell him that I would gladly tell him this in person, not that I expected him to actually show up this time. He responded with, "Alright, we'll see about that. Be there soon." Now, I was a little worried at this point because it crossed my mind that he may not actually be gay and might be some homophobe looking to bash some gay guys. My mind always goes back to those men who have lost their lives after meeting up with someone on Grindr. However, I realize I never gave him my address. Now, this is the conversation we had. I say, "Nice try, but I never gave you my address." "Yes, you did, stupid. You just didn't know it was me. Be ready. I'm on the way." At this point, my anxiety starts setting off because I did give my address to a guy who had to cancel last minute, but I didn't think anything of it because it was before Jesus had messaged me a second time. I tried to think about what to do, so I decided to try and document his threats. I respond, "I know I didn't give you my address. Besides, what do you want with me anyway?" "You'll see. I've got something for you." Now, the trailer park is always having police go by there, and my neighborhood is separated from theirs by a bayou. At night, I always heard gunshots out there, so I began to panic. What if he had a gun? What if he brought friends with him? I say, "Oh yeah? And what's that?" "Something that'll shut you up. I'm outside." I started freaking out because I couldn't tell if he was just trying to mess with me or if he really was outside. I had been screenshotting everything and sent it to the Grindr admins to report him for credible threats of violence. I wasn't sure if I should call the cops or not because if he was lying, I didn't want to look stupid. Plus, I wasn't sure if it was even enough for them to do anything. I decided to peek outside from the upstairs window and see if I could spot him. If I could get the make and model of his car, maybe I could at least have something to give the police. I live in the middle of a cul-de-sac, so when I look out the window, I can see all the way to the end of the street. When I looked out, I saw a car I'd never seen before parked on the side of the road at the end. My heart was pounding me because I just knew it was him, but a part of me was hoping it wasn't. I decided I'd test him and see if he really was out there. He says, "I'm waiting." "I'm outside already, where are you?" Of course I wasn't, but if that was him, and he did know my address, then why wouldn't he just park outside my house? Sure enough, I was right. I see you. You're gonna get it now." "Then give it to me, I'm right here. Just you wait." I knew he couldn't see me from his car because I was peeking out discreetly and our windows have a privacy shade on them where people only see a black screen from the outside. A few more minutes go by and the car takes off. I have a feeling that he used Grindr to triangulate the area of where my neighborhood was, but of course he couldn't find my exact house because it hadn't been him who I'd given my address to. Grindr later sent me a message saying that he'd been banned from the app and they'd contacted the local authorities. I never heard anything else after that, so I don't know what became of it. The cops never contacted me if they did pay him a visit, and I never heard from him again. Now I'm married, so I don't use Grindr anymore, thankfully. Still, it took a while before I was able to sleep soundly after that. I rarely left the house, and when I did, I always made sure his car wasn't around, anywhere. The following is one of the darkest chapters of my life so far. It's the story of how my first real boyfriend stalked me for about 5 years after I broke up with him. The reason I broke up with him is because I noticed him becoming increasingly possessive and controlling. This worried me a lot, and I was a few years younger than he was, so I decided to get out. The breakup itself was so heart-wrenching. He cried and screamed and begged for me not to leave, but that just gave me all the reason to do so. He threw a full-on tantrum, and it only cemented that I'd made the right decision. Initially, after the breakup, his behavior seemed like the harmless melancholy of a bitter ex. Constant texting and phone calls, sending gifts to my workplace, asking my friends to try to convince me to get back with him, the usual sort of thing. After about 6 months, this hadn't died down at all. It was this ongoing saga of drama and misery that I really started to get depressed about. I started bumping into him on my way home from work, or if I was out shopping. I had to move back in with my parents just so he'd stopped hanging around outside my apartment. I couldn't leave my job immediately, but moving back in with my parents didn't make a difference anyways. This behavior continued for a few years, becoming increasingly worse, and the police were very reluctant to do anything, since they obviously classed it as some kind of domestic dispute. I ended up moving out of my parents and into a new place after a few months. I even changed jobs twice, and somehow he always managed to track me down, no matter how careful I seemed to be. I didn't use social media and even insisted friends of mine not take any pictures of me in case they posted them on their own social media accounts. I kept my phone number within my circle of friends, but somehow he always managed to get my new number. I ended up a paranoid wreck, thinking that one of my friends had betrayed me. We had a serious falling out, with me accusing him of prolonging the whole nightmarish situation by showing more loyalty to my abusive ex than he had me. I called him things that no friend should call another. He hung up on me after a medley of curse words spilled from my lips. I ended up crying myself to sleep that night, unable to eat a single thing out of pure stress. At this stage, I could barely sleep. I had no appetite. I couldn't concentrate at work and spent most evenings drinking myself into a stupor. I was a shadow of my former self. Then another year passed, and as our encounters got worse, I decided to report him to the police again. Only this time I had comprehensive documentation of his stalking, printouts of text messages, etc. At long last, having already done the bulk of their jobs all on my own, the police finally took action on my behalf. A couple of months go by after I reported him to the police. I wake up one morning to a story in the Globe about staff in the state tax office were using resources improperly. My stalker ex was the main perpetrator, using his job to access all of my information. In his job, he had access to my tax records, which meant every time I changed job, address, or phone number, he had access to the most up-to-date information. What's more, he'd been using his position to swindle thousands of dollars in tax revenue into his own personal bank account. Before the court case began, he ended his own life, and I'm not ashamed to say I cried with relief. They were the worst years of my adult life, and I was just so glad that they were finally over. I met Lucy for the first time when she fell asleep on my arm on the bus. When she woke up, she gave me a really weird look before shambling off the bus. I figured she was weirded out that I didn't wake her sooner, so I kicked myself for being a creep and went on with my day. Can't win 'em all. I was thrown for quite a loop when her whole friend group was sitting by my usual spot on the bus the next day. Being an awkward teen, I wasn't about to turn down any kind of positive attention. I got to know her friends and ended up on good terms with her before I realized I hadn't asked her name. I'm hard of hearing, so I didn't hear her when she said her name. Lucy, right? Yeah? Lucy and I had your typical high school courting process. This is to say, she was overwhelmingly forward, and after a few weeks, I got the hint. As we were getting close, Lucy would fixate on learning about past heartbreaks and finding out about my personal life. I'm a serial oversharer, so I didn't really mind talking about myself, but she would constantly butt in by saying how messed up things were and that she'd kicked my friend's butt for hurting me. I was weirded out. Even at 16, I knew that was cringy and I was going through my emo phase. The thing that really bugged me at the time was that she asked so much about me and she would never say anything about herself. It made me feel terrible always venting and never helping her out. During this time, she missed a few days and I let another girl sit by me since it was an overcrowded bus and I didn't think it mattered. When Lucy came back and saw me with another girl, you'd think she was shot. She just about ran to the seat behind us and started going off. I can't remember what exactly Lucy said, but the other girl never talked to me again after that. Once her rival was gone, Lucy reclaimed her spot next to me and was all sunshine and rainbows. Nobody ever asked to sit in Lucy's spot after that. Lucy always had a crude sense of humor, but after a while things started getting hurtful. She would take jabs at my insecurities, and anytime I got upset about it, she would just continue to prod, just because I wasn't able to take a joke. These jokes usually stopped just shy of outright insulting me. When Lucy wasn't breaking me down, she was super affectionate. She would sleep on my chest while we rode home on the bus, and she'd even talk about herself from time to time. I don't remember the first time she hit me. It seems like something that would be burned into my memory, some kind of cinematic moment in my life. Honestly, it all just blended together after a while. I know it started off small, though, flicking me and playful slapping, but by the end of it, she would elbow me in the ribs for telling a bad joke. It didn't register as anything abusive until she slammed me into a wall while we were walking through the hallway after class. She told a terrible joke and she shoved me hard into the wall. She laughed because of the sound I made before shoving me again. People were going through the halls with us, but they didn't do anything. Sometimes I wonder what they thought of me. I didn't dump her after the hallway incident, but I did start standing up for myself. We started getting into a lot of fights after that. Of course, they only ever ended in one of two ways. She was right, or it was an honest mistake. I tried to break things off a few times around that time, but every time I did, she had a new sob story I hadn't heard before that made her actions totally understandable. I let it get in my head that she was some tragic soul and that I could help her. I convinced myself there was something noble about taking the abuse, and nobody I knew tried to step in and stop me. I finally got the nerve to dump her after 3 major things happened within a 3-week span. First, I found out she was taking pictures of me while I wasn't looking and posting them online. The weird thing was, I only found out because she showed me. It felt gross seeing a bunch of nearly identical pictures of me not facing the camera. The way she showed me was worse. She seemed excited, like I'd be happy she invaded my privacy. The second weird thing happened when I tried to wake her on the bus. After about a half hour on my chest not saying anything, I nudged her shoulders since we were at our stop, and she just got up, looked me in the eye, and told me she wasn't asleep. Combined with the pictures, this seemed really weird to me. She didn't try to be cute or romantic about it or anything, just, I pretend to sleep on you sometimes. That just really weirded me out. The breaking point came when she was showing off some award she got from school. There was something off about the award. It didn't have her name on it. Oh no. It had a name. It even had a picture of her smiling on it. The problem is, it wasn't addressed to Lucy. You can imagine what I felt when I found out I didn't know my girlfriend's name. A few days later, we got into one of our usual fights and I broke things off. Lucy always was the persistent type. She would sit a few rows behind me on the bus and stare at me while I went to my car after getting off the bus. Looking at her wouldn't make her stop. It felt like she wanted me to know she was watching me. One day, when she got on the bus, she looked me right in the eyes for a solid 20 seconds while she walked past me to her new seat. I'm pretty sure she was expecting me to say something to her. The next year, I graduated and got a retail job. End of story, right? I thought so too. It was the start of Christmas season, and I was working cashier that night. Lucy, or so I thought her name was, came into the store I was working at, random chance. It had been 1.5 years since we broke up at this point, so I wasn't happy to see her, but surely we could pretend it wasn't weird. She gave me the look the squirrel in Ice Age gives his nut. She grabbed something from the front and went right into my line. She didn't say a word to me, but she wouldn't break eye contact, and she was swaying like an excited toddler. It hurt to look at her. I rang her up silently and waited for her to leave. Then I looked at the other cashiers for support, and he told me she was giving her weird vibes. I got this really bad gut feeling after she left. Lucy became a regular at our little shop. She would come in and creep out my coworkers. Lucy never really tried to hide what she was doing. One of the cashiers mentioned how often she came while ringing her out, and she said she was visiting me. She didn't say my name, but she described me. After that, whenever she showed up, someone would make a note of it on the radio. She was usually in one of the areas bordering my workspace. I heard about her a lot more than I saw her, so I think she was hiding from me. She never got banned from the store, despite complaints because the managers were penny pinchers who would sell any one of us out to get sales up. I know Lucy was responsible for at least one resignation from my workplace. Someone who looked like me caught her staring a few times and heard how often she came. After a while, I guess the stress just wasn't worth minimum wage. The last time I saw Lucy at the store was a little over 1 year ago. I was hanging out with one of the girls in the back while we were loading up carts with stuff we had to stock. We were right by the back entrance, so you could see right in from the store proper. I left to put up the stuff in my cart, and when I came back, I saw her. She was standing about 40 feet from the back entrance, still as a statue. I froze when I saw her. I watched her stare into the back for what felt like hours before she suddenly turned and walked briskly away. The girl I was talking to was still in the back when I got back. She was a lot more awkward after that. That girl quit 3 days later and just about crushed my ribs when she hugged me goodbye. She hated her job, so I'd like to think it didn't have anything to do with Lucy, but I'll never know. I left the store not too long after that and got a job that didn't involve customer service. That wasn't the last time I saw her, though. Over the summer, after taking my new job, I had a mental breakdown. I convinced myself that I was unlovable and that Lucy was really the only person I could possibly be with. I left the house without any conceivable plan to find her. With stars in the sky, lit by street lamps, I saw her. She was with another girl. I got so close I could almost touch her before I snapped to my senses. I thought about her stalking me at the store, and I realized I was becoming her. I ran home. I cried that night. The last time I saw Lucy was last week. I was walking home from work and decided to stop for dinner. I thought I saw her in line, but convinced myself it was someone else. I ordered and sat down to eat. I was looking out the window while I ate, and she took the table between me and the window I was looking out. She was with some guy that looked vaguely familiar, maybe a school friend. She was at an angle, so she was half looking at him, and every few seconds she would look right at me. I knew it was her. She changed her hair. It looks an awful lot like mine now. After I finished, I went to the bathroom because I felt sick. After washing my hands, I looked in the mirror, and I felt like I could die. It hadn't occurred to me before, but I was wearing my work uniform, complete with company name on my hat in big letters. She was reading my hat. Lucy hasn't been to my current job yet, but I'm sure she'll turn up eventually. I'm moving soon, so I'm just hoping I'm not here anymore when Lucy turns up. Lucy has been a part of my life for the last 4 years. We dated for 4 months in high school, and she just keeps turning up. I wasn't a paragon of mental health before I met her, but I feel like she broke me as a person, and I'll never forgive her for what she did to me. Since her abuse and her stalking, I've developed serious trust issues. I get painfully nervous leaving my house, and people who show interest in me immediately put me on edge. I've tried to date since everything happened, but I just can't. I'm too much work at this point, so I've decided that I'll stay single until I can work through my issues. But I'm begging you, Lucy, or whatever your name is, please, leave me alone. I remember my first summer after my boyfriend and I moved into a small one-bedroom apartment together. It was almost heaven. It didn't matter the kitchen was too small or that the neighbors were too noisy. We finally had a place we all could call home. One morning, I decided to sleep in while my boyfriend got ready and left for work. But due to it being a sweltering summer morning, I had the bedroom window open to allow for a bit of fresh air to get into the apartment. As I tried to drift back to sleep, I was startled awake by our doorbell going. I tried to ignore it, hoping whoever it was would just go away, but it kept ringing. I figured it could have been a package that I needed to sign for, so grumbling away to myself, I pulled some clothes on and went to look out of the peephole. Nothing. No one there. I cursed myself for delaying. I gave up on sleeping and decided to hop in the shower. At about midday, I went to go open the sliding glass door that leads to the concrete slab that serves as our patio. We had cats, and keeping it closed was super important, so, as you can imagine, it was very odd that when I opened up the glass door, I noticed that the screen door was slightly ajar. I promptly closed it, making a mental note to chastise my boyfriend before opting to soak up some sun. My boyfriend finished work around 4. I was taking a break from sunbathing, sitting on my iMac at a desk with a window that faces the building parking lot. As I said, it was really hot that day, and I had the bedroom window wide open. So when he pulled into the parking lot, I heard him and another female voice start to have a conversation. I didn't think anything of it at the time. I'm hardly the jealous type, and we're pretty friendly with the neighbors, even the loud ones. So I just stayed in place and waited for him to walk up to the apartment. When he did, he was very upset. His psycho ex-girlfriend had been waiting for him in the parking lot. I had no idea this girl even existed. He'd failed to ever mention her for as long as we'd been together. I came to find out this wasn't him being deceptive. He just didn't want to bring up such painful memories. But the really creepy part is that she tried to invite herself inside. When he told her no, she started off on some frenzied rant about how it was because there was another girl living there, how she knew he was seeing someone else, and how wrong that was. I hadn't answered the door. I hadn't done anything all day but wake up, take a shower, sunbathe, and sit on the computer, all in an area with window blinds. But if you were to get really, really close to the bedroom window, you can kind of see through the blinds. I'm convinced that she was snooping around the apartment that day. It seems way too much of a coincidence that the screen door was open after the doorbell rang so many times. Then she just shows up and somehow knows that I'm living here all within a few hours. No way. She was in our apartment while I was sleeping. I just can't prove that beyond all doubt. I'm glad I didn't answer the door that day, but that feeling is dwarfed by how relieved I was when I heard she'd moved a few states over for work. Now we might actually find some peace together in our little slice of heaven. Unless, of course, she comes back. I went to Paris on my gap year back in 2017. I was there for about 4 days, and it was April, around the time of the Champs-Élysées attack where 3 policemen were shot. I happened to witness this from inside a store when it happened and had to walk back to my hostel after. I was 19. Anyway, my second day there, I think, I had tickets to the Louvre. I set off in the morning extremely excited and not at all daunted by anything. It was my first time traveling alone out of the country in general. I'm British. I loved it. I had Google Maps out. Walking the whole way there was about 45 minutes, but I didn't mind. About 15 minutes in, I'm walking, and a guy notices me, calls out a whistle, and smiles at me. Okay, I would be annoyed, but I'm in Paris. Who cares? Carry on walking. A few minutes later, he appears next to me, smiling and saying hi. He's about early mid-20s, very tan skin. I say hi back, surprised, thinking he must have been following me. Strange. We began to talk, and I tell him I'm here traveling and going to the Louvre today. He asks me a lot of questions, can't remember exactly what about, but we have a general conversation in my very, very poor French. I ask him why he's following me. Doesn't he have somewhere to be? This doesn't faze him. He smiles and carries on talking, saying he doesn't have anywhere to be. Okay. He starts saying I should go to dinner with him tonight. I say great. In my head, that's not going to happen, so I decide to start playing around with the conversation. I ask, do you smoke? He looks surprised and says, yes, do you? Keep in mind, his English is really poor too, which I thought was odd because why would you attempt to talk to someone in English and find out about them if you know you can't that well? Oh well. I look up smoke in Google French and say, do you smoke ganja? He looks slightly confused but laughs and says, oh yes. You come with me and we can smoke later, he says. I laugh too, thinking, righty mate. I don't smoke. This was funny to throw him off a bit. He also doesn't know his way around, which was odd. Had no idea where the Louvre was. I didn't bother to ask him his life story, so never found out where he came from. I told him I have tickets already, I'm going straight in. I don't know why you're following me. He doesn't mind this and continues and says he'll wait for me. We can go for dinner later. You can come back to my apartment and meet my friends. We can smoke. Okay. We get there. My heart is beating a little faster at this point. I'm alone, in a different country. What do I do? Well, the entrance to the Louvre has a big open space full of people, which was slightly comforting. I finally see you get your tickets at a kiosk. This is the first time I straight up walk away, ignoring him and go there. There's an older guy who speaks English there, for tourists obviously, and I say hello, I'd like my ticket, blah blah blah. He could have been English for all I know, but my mind was going too fast a pace to notice. The guy now stood at a distance, watching me. I look the man straight in the eye as he asks me a question, and I say, there's a man following me. His expression changes, and we keep eye contact the entire time. He says, where? I say to the far right. He glances and looks back at me. He asks a few questions. I say, well, I'm going there straight away, so what's he doing? He tells me to go straight in, don't talk to him, and walk away. I agree. The guy suddenly comes right up to me and says, "What's going on?" Or something. We don't break eye contact, and the man says, "Hey, are you going to be okay?" I change tone and say, "Yes, thank you so much." The guy continues to follow me, but at this point I'm over it and I leave him behind. Going down an escalator, I see him watching me and looking around. The weird and kind of sad thing is, I try to tell all the security they had, which was a lot. Down to the entrance, there's a man following me. What do I do? A French lady behind the desk who stamps my ticket says, "Ticket, please. Make your way downstairs." Fine. With no one listening to me, I go to a security desk in the Louvre itself and say the same. This lady talks to me, asks my information, then proceeds to tell me he was probably trying to rob me. In broad daylight? Following me for over 30 minutes? Come on. There's a cold feeling all over my body at this point, but I'm safe and sound inside. They had numerous soldiers with guns walking around the place and outside too, so to an extent I wasn't in serious danger. But once again, being alone, young, my hostel far away. If I told him where I was staying, which he continuously asked for, but I didn't tell him, something else could have happened entirely, and I'm so glad I got to enjoy the rest of the trip, save for the shooting, without much hassle. I still haven't told my parents. My mother would freak. I live in a relatively small town in the country. When I was younger, around 13 to 14, I used to be obsessed with anything secret related. I would spend hours looking up conspiracy theories, watching documentaries about foreign affairs, reading articles about secret wars. I would tell everything I learned to my friends and family, but all I would really get is a "that's nice" or "I doubt that ever happened" from them. No one seemed to be interested, except for one friend of mine named Craig. We would hang out every now and then, and all we would talk about is conspiracies. Occasionally, we would have a sleepover, and instead of playing video games or watching movies, we would get out our laptops and do as much research as we could, writing down websites we deemed creepy and writing in notebooks filled with information that we had gathered. It was quite exciting for both of us. We felt like we knew things we weren't meant to know, and that gave us a rush. So one night, Craig was over at mine for a sleepover, and we were doing our usual secret work, and I came across this website deep within Google, on something like page 79 in the search engine. It had a list of Russian statesmen and politicians from a former branch of the Russian space program. I knew that because I recognized the intercosmos symbol on the top left-hand corner of the page. The page was all in Russian, and I just randomly started clicking around. I eventually got to a page that looked like contact information. It had what looked like an email address at the bottom. So dumb, naive me thought it would be a good idea to send them an email using my own personal email address. At the time, my email was just my full name. I wrote an email consisting something along the lines of, "Hello, my name is blank, and I was wondering if you would be willing to answer some questions I have about your space program." I then proceed to list conspiracy theories about the Russian space program and demand an answer from them. Craig and I thought this was very clever, as we were hoping to at least get a response. In our heads, if they denied what we had asked, then they were just covering up the evidence and therefore we had real proof. To our surprise, the email actually sent. We thought it would have been unable to send due to how old we thought the email address was. Weeks passed, and we eventually forgot about the email. We just got along with our daily lives of going to school and doing dumb, young teenage stuff. One weekend, I was sitting at the dinner table with my family, and my sister started asking my father if he had any Russian friends. My father said no, but he had worked in Russia for a few years in the past. My sister goes on to say that her friend's mother was stopped in the street while walking home from work by two men with Russian accents in a dark green car. They asked if she knew where they could find, and my family's last name, house. My dad said that was weird, and he would call my sister's friend's mom later. I immediately thought back to that email that I had sent. My young head started spinning with ideas of spies trying to get to me and my family. I actually thought it was rather exciting. After dinner, my father called my sister's friend's mom, and I listened in from upstairs. I couldn't really hear much out of my father's end of the conversation, but as soon as my father hung up, he called the family down to have a talk. He told us that what my sister said was true, and he was worried that maybe some thieves were trying to scope the house out. He told us to keep a lookout for a big dark green car with dark windows. If we saw something suspicious, we were to immediately find him and tell him. It was at this point I thought to tell my dad about the email, but I thought I would be getting in trouble, so I decided against it. The next day I was asked by my mother to take the trash out to the front to be collected tomorrow. We lived at the bottom of a long path in the countryside, so it takes about 5 minutes to walk up to the top of the driveway. As I was near the top of the path, I noticed a car parked up just off the side of our driveway entrance about 50 feet away. When I got closer, I realized it was the same car my father had described to me, a dark green car with blacked out windows just sitting there. I pretended not to notice it and just dumped the trash. I turned around and got out my phone and called my dad's mobile. He picked up and I told him that the car he had described was at the top of the driveway. He told me to come back to the house and he would be straight out. I slowly started to walk back home, keeping the car in my peripheral vision. Not a minute later, my dad was jogging up the driveway and asked me where the car was. I turned around and pointed at it. He began to run up to the driver's side towards the car. Suddenly, the car's engine turned on and it peeled away and sped down the road. Stunned by what had just happened, me and my father just looked at each other. We both ran back home. He told me to promise not to tell my mother or sister as it may scare them. When we got back home, he took me into his home office, then he called the police. The police said there isn't much that they could do as they hadn't done anything illegal, but to call back if they kept showing up. Well, they did show up again. Every time it was me or my dad that would notice them and the same route would happen. One of us would see the car, try to get close or flag it down. It would speed off, call the police, then repeat. My mother even saw it once when coming home from shopping. The police eventually sent a car to patrol our area, but they never saw the dark green car. My dad was getting noticeably paranoid and even considered buying a rifle. This whole time I genuinely thought it was my fault, and if I had never sent that email then none of this would happen. But I just didn't want to get in trouble. Once I got actually quite close to the car as it stalled while trying to drive off. I tried to read the license plate, but the car was side on to me. By the time I got any closer, it was too far down the road. At that point, I wasn't scared anymore. Just angry, and I wanted the people in that car just to leave us alone. The worst part for me happened when I was alone at home. Both my mother and father were at work, and my sister was at one of her after-school programs. My dad told me to keep the door locked at all times, and if anything were to happen, to call the police. I was watching TV in the living room when I heard the gravel in our driveway move. This was the distinctive sound of a car coming down the driveway. I got up to see which one of my parents was home from work, but it wasn't either of them. The dark green car was now in the driveway. I felt so helpless and scared. It just stayed, parked there, engine still running. I jumped up to grab the home phone, but as soon as I got up, the car turned around and drove off. I immediately called my dad. He told me he would be home soon and just to keep the door locked. When I got home, I told him what happened. He didn't see the car when driving back, but again he called the police. This continued for at least 2 weeks. Every day we felt like more and more like we were being watched, stalked, even hunted. We would see the car at all hours of the day, even noticing them around midnight, just sitting there at the top of our driveway. However, one day, they didn't turn up, and then finally the car just stopped showing up altogether. We never saw it again or the people who drove it, but it left the family scared for a good few months. After this experience, I stopped my research. Craig and I drifted apart, and I got into what I deemed safer hobbies. I cannot be sure what started these events, and I don't know if this had anything to do with my email. It may have just been a coincidence in timing. It did, however, feel sinister in nature, and that fear is stuck. That feeling of knowing you are being watched and not feeling safe in your own home has lasted with me for quite some time. So like a lot of people, I have a Discord account. It's got my first name on it and a picture of myself there, mostly because I only used it to talk to IRL friends, so I didn't care about my face being there or anything. Recently, I decided to try Minecraft for the first time in 4 years because my friends were talking about an upcoming update and they wanted us all to play it. I figured I would hop on early and get familiar with some of the new mechanics and stuff. I found a server and was playing on there for about 4 days before I got told that they give you in-game rewards for linking your Discord account to their server. So, blinded by shiny stuff, I joined their Discord server. It had about 400 online users, so I wasn't really worried about people seeing me at all, and I was pretty low down the list alphabetically. As I got more used to the player base, I got more comfortable talking in the server via text chat. They had a side channel that's supposed to make selling in-game items a little easier, so I made a message saying I was buying something. About 4 hours later, some guy added me with, "I will give you for free, handsome," and a winky face. I didn't really know what to say to this, so I just said, "Okay, thanks." "No problem, winky face," was his response. Shortly after this interaction, this person kept requesting to teleport to me in-game, and when I'd ask why, he'd say, "I just want to hang out with you," or it'd be some kind of variation of that. He did this pretty much every time I was online, and he'd just follow me around my base for like an hour, asking me questions about random things, then he'd go away. I'm not usually the type of player to speak to people at all when I'm in an in-game or something. I just keep quiet and get on with my own stuff, so it was really uncomfortable having this guy doing this. After maybe 3 days of this behavior, he stopped calling me handsome and decided to kick it up a notch and called me sexy in-game via PMs. I politely asked him if he'd just stop calling me these things like that, and he didn't respond back. 2 hours later, he messages me asking how old I am. I hesitantly reply 21. No response again. I decided to get off for the night because I was tired. I boot up my PC about 2 days later and open Discord to see someone has PM'd me on there, and it's this guy again. He said hello and asked me to call him next time I'm online. I didn't. I just ignored his message, then closed the conversation. By this point, the guy was really freaking me out. I have really bad anxiety problems when it comes to people giving me attention, so I decided to just turn off my PC and I watched some YouTube in bed on my phone. The next day, I opened Discord because a friend wanted me to watch him play Hearthstone and give him advice. We do that for about an hour, then he gets off. About 40 minutes later, the guy who was being weird to me tried to call me, and I had a complete brain fart and thought it was my friend calling, so I accepted it. I realized my mistake almost immediately, so I mute my mic. The guy is eating some potato chips from the sound of it, and after about 4 seconds of loud eating, he says, "Oh, don't mute your mic, I'm curious to hear you speak." Then lets out a small giggle. The guy was German and had a very weird and creepy tone of voice. It was like all high and quivery. He starts to talk about how attractive he thinks I am. By the way, I should have stressed this earlier. I really am not overly attractive like this guy was making out. I'm just a normal-looking dude. And then he talks about how I haven't been on in a few days. Then he puts a picture in the chat and says, "What do you think about that?" And it's a picture of his junk and a fleshlight or something. I immediately end the call and close Discord and was just freaking out internally. About 5 days go by and I finally get back on the Minecraft server, and as soon as I get on, this guy messages me a smiley face. So I tab out and get the thought to open Discord and block this weirdo for good. When I open up the conversation, there's 8 unread messages from him, and like 5 of them were, quote-unquote, thinking of you. I just quickly block him, then quit Discord. I alt-tab back in the game, and luckily enough, there's a /ignore command, which is basically the same as blocking him, so I do that as well. This was just so weird and crazy, and it's my first experience like this ever. Even though it happened just under 2 weeks ago, I only fully got over it a few days ago. Like I said earlier, I get horrible anxiety when I get a lot of attention like that. What made it worse is that I was on an account that had my face on it and my first name, and the fact I've never been in a situation where I've gotten attention from the same gender like that before. At the time, I just didn't know what to do because I was so anxious, but thinking back, I should have just blocked this idiot immediately after he was making me uncomfortable. Because of this, I've enabled the setting on Discord where it doesn't automatically show images. I also messaged one of the admins of the Minecraft server telling them what happened, and they said they'll take action. What's worse is that this guy is actually a regular member of the server and a high rank, so it makes me wonder if I'm the only victim this weirdo has harassed like this. He could have done this before, to a younger person. I'm a 19-year-old female with a gym-going boyfriend. Typically, I attended our local gym with him, but sometimes his work schedule makes it so that I have to go there by myself, which is normally not an issue until this one night. I entered the gym and immediately was welcomed by a man I've seen there before, smiling at me. Being the polite person I am, I smiled back. I've never taken notice to him before until tonight. Little did I know smiling back at him would be a mistake. I carried on with my workout, but the whole time I felt eyes on the back of me. Each time I looked around, I would catch his eyes meeting mine with the biggest smile on his face. I'm not talking about a cute little shy smile, I'm talking about a full-blown creepy grin. It was already late at night and I wasn't in the mood at all, so I quickly finished my workout routine, which I would add this dude was picking up every machine next to me and trying to get my attention, but I just cold-shouldered him. Once I was finished, I ran to the ladies' locker room, grabbed my keys, and ran as fast as I could to my car. Now my car is older, so when you start, you're supposed to wait for the engine to heat up a little bit, but not tonight. I threw it in reverse and could hear the guy shouting, "Hey, ma'am, hey!" Next thing I knew, he was at my window smiling at me with the most crazed look in his eyes I've ever seen in a person. In a stern voice, I asked what his problem was, and what he said sent shivers through me. "I know you have a boyfriend. I see you here with him, and I don't want you to think I'm following you at all. My name is David, and I promise I have no sinister intentions, but I just want you to know that I see that sadness behind your eyes, and every night I pray for you." At this point I was shaking, and I just honestly wanted to run him over. I'm used to guys complimenting my looks, but never have I ever heard anything like that. I quickly said, thanks, and drove away. I called my mom in a panic, and she teased me, saying, "Oh, he likes you." But I had a very bad gut feeling about this guy. I head to Walmart after to grab something quick, and guess who was there basically waiting for me? David. He followed me from the gym to Walmart. I was in the self-checkout line and called my mom up again. This time, she told me to stay on the phone with her and pretend that she's my boyfriend. So I told her what time I should be home and that I loved her and couldn't wait to see her when I got home. But this didn't throw this guy off. He approached me and kept saying, "I need to tell you something," over and over again until I snapped and yelled, "What?" He then told me, I would love it for you and your boyfriend to have coffee with me and hear my testimony." I had never been so scared in my life. He may not have followed me home, to my knowledge, but the fact that he followed me around the gym and to Walmart had scared me lifeless. My boyfriend and I went back to the gym to get his information, and the worker that night already had his information pulled up. She said she saw that I looked very uncomfortable and that he was eyeing me up the entire time and knew I would be back to report him. They canceled his membership, but I never filed a police report due to some bad encounters with the police in the past. My boyfriend ended up making a Facebook status to warn other young women going to the gym, and I thought it had ended there, but David saw the post and ended up sending my boyfriend basically his whole life story, claiming he didn't have any romantic interest in me and other nonsense to get him to take the post down. We looked at his profile and his bio box said, "I am not good, but he is." And that completely freaked me out even more. Like, what does that even mean? To make matters worse, he confessed to my boyfriend that he doesn't even live or work in our city, so it makes me wonder if he got kicked out of his local gym for doing this to other women. A month or so after, he messaged my boyfriend claiming we would never see him again as he's going overseas. His intentions are still unknown to me because who tells a stranger that you'd pray for them every night? It makes me wonder how many times I went to that gym alone while he was there watching me. David, if you're reading this, I hope I never see your creepy self again, and that you should stop approaching women who are alone like that. I still look over my shoulder every time I go home, and I make sure you're not at my gym anymore before proceeding to work out. I also hope you're still not praying for me every night, especially after what happened. I'm very pale, tall and thin, with brown eyes and shoulder-length black hair. I look so vulnerable and weak when you see me, which is really true, often the reason why I always get stalked, touched, and catcalled. In our country, all public schools wear uniforms, which made people easily figure out if you're a student or not. If you're wearing a school uniform and it's weekdays, you're not allowed to enter any malls until about 5:30 in the afternoon. That's the reason why I was waiting for my uncle to pick me up from school and not hanging out somewhere else. My friends have also gone home that time. This particular day, well, I just lost a competition, a writing competition. I'm a campus journalist and I'm in 9th grade, which you might say is lame, but us campus journalists are all required to join this competition. Annually, I'd always win and get on stage, but this year I lost, which made me really upset. The competition ended very early, so I texted my mom to say to my uncle to pick me up. Then I got out of school with my friends and we went our separate ways. They all go the same way to their houses, and I'm the only one separated for them to walk the other way. My uncle said to always wait at the end of the school because there he can always easily park. I walked there, really upset and waiting. 10 minutes went by and my uncle wasn't there yet, so I checked my phone. My uncle just texted me he's going to be late because it's really heavy traffic and the road is getting renovated. Great. I was just standing there waiting for another 5 minutes when 2 guys walked by. Then they saw me just standing there. I saw them, just whispering to one another, then they giggled, then came to walk back. They walked further away from me, about 15 feet, but you can still really see them. I was already upset and getting annoyed, so I didn't really say anything to them. I could have just told them to go away or walked further, but I was really tired and annoyed, so I just continued standing there waiting. They started calling me. Psst, psst, what's your name, girl? From far away. I didn't answer and snobbed them, but they still kept insisting, and calling me they started saying, "Hey, what's your name? Always snobbing us. Were you feeling famous, huh?" By this time, I started getting both creeped out and annoyed. You gotta understand, though, when I'm scared, I couldn't move or speak. I don't know, it's just my body doing that, and I just stood there, not even looking in their way, as if I didn't even hear them. When they kept insisting on my name, they started asking me what time it was. I still just stood them up and pretended I didn't hear them. Then they started walking towards me and stopped about 5 feet away from me and started whispering and laughing. Now I was starting to get scared. Mind you, I was the only one in that spot with 2 creepy students stalking and catcalling me. I felt so helpless, but I didn't even do anything. At the time, I was leaning my back against a yellow bar they used to block roads when they wanted that road closed. I was leaning on it, and the other guy sat on the bar and started shaking it madly. I still ignored them, but I stopped leaning against the yellow bar. They kept insisting what time it was. "Hey, what time is it?" And then they laugh. Other guy responds, "Well, it's time for you to die then." Then both of the guys started laughing. I couldn't believe what they said. I'm on the verge of bawling, and I've been waiting for my uncle for 20 minutes with these two creepy guys beside me. That's when I started texting my best friend. Told him everything that happened, and he was so infuriated at the situation and at the guys, he wanted to pick me up, but he was on vacation in another country with his family, so he had no choice but just to give me advice. Then, when I was in the middle of texting, the guy walked in front of me and asked, "Can I ask what time it is?" while looking down. 4:30. It's 4:30. I responded out of panic. It's when I realized he was looking at my ID that I was wearing. Good thing, though, my ID was on its back and you couldn't see my name in class section. I was so relieved when my ID was on its back. Then the guys started walking further away again. They started walking away again when they noticed a car driving near me, and it being my uncle. They walked away from me and looked the other way, so they couldn't see me, and they just pretended like nothing happened. I quickly jumped in the car, scared to death and upset. This day had to have been the worst. I lost a competition and got catcalled by a bunch of creepy guys. My uncle drove away, and after a few minutes I told my uncle what had happened. He was angry at the guys and wanted to come back to beat them, but I didn't want to go back there. I was already having the worst day, and these guys might not have been there anymore, and who knows what they would have done in response. Now, I know this isn't quite as scary, but when you're in this situation and you just can't move or talk, you're scared and want to cry. But I felt helpless and numb. Hey friends, thanks for listening. Be sure to subscribe and click that notification bell to be alerted of all future narrations. If you got a story, be sure to submit them to my subreddit, r/letsreadofficial, and give and receive feedback from the community, and maybe even hear your story featured on the next video. And join my Discord, interact with me and other listeners directly. And if you want to support me even more, grab early access to all future narrations for just $1 a month on Patreon, and maybe even pick up some Let's Read merch on Spreadshirt. And check out the Let's Read podcast, where you can hear all these stories in long compilation form and save huge on data, located on both Spotify and Apple Podcasts. Links in the bio. Thanks so much, friends. And remember, Stalker, Stalker stories, Stalker, Stalker stories, Stalker, Stalker stories now.